So as you said, I think it's going to be very beneficial for private practice owners, therapists running their business, billers, even admins that are doing billing work. So we're going to try to cover a lot of different challenges and best practices and what you can be doing better, as well as what we can be doing better as well. So just from the Hello Note side, we are always listening to feedback. Kara, I know you're listening to feedback as well from everyone in the community. And, as therapists ourselves, we want to make this work as a community and network with everyone to essentially make everyone's lives easier when it comes to running a practice. And with billing, it's not always clear cut, depending on the insurances you bill. Some insurances have strict eligibility rules, authorization restrictions. So we want to be here to help you understand that. If there's anything that you have a question on, let us know. Anything that we can improve on, let us know. I know we already have a lot of things in the works to make things easier, but we're always receptive to feedback. So thanks everyone for joining. And if you're going to be listening later, please also reach out to us. We'll be happy to hear feedback after you listen to the recording.
And before we get started, just in case, I'm guessing the majority of people on here probably are familiar with Steve and myself, but a little background just in case you're not. So my name's Kara Welke. I've been an occupational therapist for 25 years, started my practice in 2018, and that's when I first met Steve. And then in 2019, Steve and I joined forces and we started a therapy business builder program where we help therapists start, build, and grow their practices. And that program has evolved dramatically over the last several years. So we not only help therapists that are just getting started, but we're helping more and more therapy practices that have been up and running for quite a few years, but aren't meeting the goals that they had hoped to meet. So a little bit about me. Steve, do you want to, just in case there's someone on here that might not be familiar with you, do you want to give a little background about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Steve Glukh. I am an occupational therapist. I've been practicing for about 12 years or so now, since I graduated, and Hello Note was kind of conceptualized once I graduated and I realized how much documentation and billing therapists need to do, because in school we did not learn too much about that. We went to school, a lot of us went to school because we wanted to help people, help treat people, right? Whether you're a physical therapist, occupational, or speech therapist, right? We went to school because we wanted to give back to your patients to regain their function, right? So once I left school and I began a career in outpatient, I quickly realized how much extra work needed to be done outside of patient care. So that's where Hello Note kind of the idea was born. I created a little program for myself, and with collaboration through partners, with Kara, we got into bringing Hello Note nationally, and we're excited to provide an all-in-one EMR solution, which includes documentation, billing, scheduling, even marketing and bookkeeping tools. So we really are trying to do an all-in-one solution for an affordable price, because we are therapists. We understand what therapists go through. We operate clinics, and that's why we're doing this webinar. We want to make sure that we relate to everyone, because the problems that we have, everyone can also have, and the problems you have, everyone else can have. So please voice your opinions and frustrations as well. I know with billing, I'm always speaking to clients, and RCM and dealing with insurances, there's always a lot to talk about. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Perfect. And again, for those of you just joining, make sure you share who you are and what you do in the chat, so you can network and we kind of have an idea of who's in here. So today's objectives for this webinar is to, again, define our revenue cycle management and highlight its critical role in the financial success of therapy private practices. to identify common challenges within the RCM cycle and understand how these obstacles can impact revenue and operational efficiency. And 3, explore some proven strategies and best practices to optimize RCM and improve financial performance in therapy practices. So before we get started, how many of you guys feel like you 100% know and understand what RCM means? Yeah, or even can you give the definition of RCM? And I will tell you know, just yes or no in the chat. And I will tell you that I don't know. I mean, how many years into my private practice, I probably had no idea what RCM even meant. As we just don't learn this in school. And a lot of people, when they're building and starting their private practice, they kind of skip over the really important foundational components and don't necessarily learn this, and it can lead to a lot of problems down the line. So that's why we felt this would be a good topic to start our private practice power hour session. So, okay, so we have quite a few no's, few yeses in here. So, okay, great. So revenue cycle management, the financial process to track patient care episodes from initial appointment scheduling to final payment. It involves managing of claim processing, payment collection, and revenue generation to ensure financial stability and operational efficiency. And I will tell you, this is one of the biggest issues we see with therapists that come to us and want help with their practice is they honestly have many pieces missing in this RCM cycle, and they're not collecting money that they should be collecting, and they don't have a good process in place. Steve, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so the RCM cycle does begin from the initial appointment to you getting paid. And one common misconception with that is once you get paid from the first insurance, because remember, the patient can have a secondary or even tertiary insurance. So it goes up until the final payment, which means you zero out the balance for the patient, even if that means the patient has to pay a patient responsibility, and we'll define those a little bit later. So yes, there are a lot of tools and kind of knowledge points you can use, and that's what we're going to aim to discuss throughout this webinar.
Oh, what we're going to do from here on out is we're going to break out the different steps of the RCM cycle and process, and we're going to give you a little definition of what it is, and then we're going to talk about common challenges and best practices. And we do have a wide variety of people on here. We have billers on here. We have therapists that have been doing this forever. So we want to hear from you guys as well on common challenges you guys are facing, and if you have any best practices that have helped you. But we will also be sharing things as we go as well. So first thing I wanted to touch on a little bit is insurance credentialing and contracting. Technically, this is a pre-RCM step. However, I personally see this as it can lead to a lot of problems down the road if it's not done correctly. And we see a lot of therapy practices getting credentialed with insurances that they may not have, they shouldn't have gotten credentialed with, either because, poor payer, they might have been better off doing out of network. Maybe they could have done, private pay instead of being credentialed with that insurance. So it's really starting off from before you even get going with your practice is deciding what insurances should you really take, and don't rely on friends in other states on what insurances they take, because one insurance in, say, North Dakota might be a great payer, and we definitely recommend being credentialed with them, but in North Carolina, they might be a horrible payer. So it's really important when you start the whole process that you think through the insurance credentialing process and what insurance you should credential with, what insurance you shouldn't credential with. Also, I posted last week, and this caused a lot of interesting comments, so I took it down, but it's also the insurance credentialing process. You could make a mistake on an application that could lead to a lot of troubles down the line. And the example last week is I was meeting with some therapists, and when they were getting credentialed with Medicare, you know, they inadvertently put non-par versus par, and they didn't realize that, and they thought that they were a participating provider. So over multiple years of providing services, they were getting reimbursed 5% less than what they thought they were, which adds up to a significant amount of lost revenue over the course of time. So not only knowing what insurances you should get credentialed with is important, but also making sure you do the credentialing correctly. And then the other thing that I know, Steve, we see a lot of people struggling with is the difference between actually being credentialed with an insurance company and being registered or with them so you can bill as an out-of-network provider. We personally recommend the hybrid approach, and where we do a combination of out-of-network, in-network, private pay, and contracting with the therapist we work with. But lots of things to think about, and then it might come to the point where you're credentialed with insurances and you may need to decide that you want to not be credentialed with them anymore because it's just not financially viable for your business. Steve, thoughts on this?
Yeah, a lot of great points. To your last point, it's very important that you know which insurances you need to be credentialed with, right? Not want. And the reason it's need is because it does affect your finances. Countless of our clients that we know, because we do speak with our clients just random topics, and so many times we have clients that just decided to get a network with an insurance when the payments were terrible. Right. So especially if you're, in a hybrid model where you do treat in the home, for example, and you have to, spend transportation time and, for your car, travel, all that expense. And then the insurance reimburses you $30, for example. And yes, this does happen for a 60-minute session. There are some insurances that will give you $30 for the session. You can't afford to do that, of course, especially if you have therapists you have to pay, right? You're going to be paying them much higher than the insurance reimburses. So it can work in maybe a brick and mortar clinic, where if you're allowed to do multiple patients at the same time. But again, you have to understand your business model. You have to outline your business plan, your model, and understand if you will turn a profit. Because if you can't turn a profit, then your business will struggle. And if your business is struggling, you will struggle along with your staff and your patients, which you definitely don't want. So it is important to figure out what the insurances are paying for. And also, even if you have an insurance that's paying a decent amount, it doesn't mean you should credential with them, right? If you're not getting referrals from those insurances, then there's really no reason to credential with them until you get to a point where you're like, okay, now I can look into credentialing with them because I'm getting referrals for those patients, right? Because I also speak to clients where they are getting decent reimbursements, but the dealing with those insurances with authorizations and so many other guidelines like restrictions of units and CPT codes is just not worth it when you're only seeing that with like 1 or 2 patients for the year. And again, it does happen. So it does really make a difference to do your due diligence on your demographic area to confirm if you should be credentialing. Other things just to throw out there, it's a long process to credential with an insurance sometimes, right? Sometimes it's not just filling out an application and next day you're approved, right? So it can take anywhere, I would say on average for private insurances or Medicare Advantage plans, I would say it can take definitely between 2 months to even 6 months, something longer. And I'm speaking from experience. It took us about a year to get credentialed with an insurance that I don't want to mention. But yes, it can take a very long time to get credentialed. And during that time, you have to follow up, right? So it's not like, okay, I submitted my application and now the insurance is going to do the rest of the work. No, they can come back and they can ask you for more questions. And a lot of times those questions are more paperwork and it's just so time consuming. So if you're doing it yourself, if you didn't hire a company to do it for you, then expect for it to be a long process. Um, what else can we talk about? Also, recredentialing, right? That goes into that as well. So when you get credentialed, it's only for a certain amount of time, and then the contract can expire, and you have to recredential, which can also mean that you have to do another long application and spend another, application and tons of documentation for the insurance to keep accepting you. Luckily, sometimes the insurances do give you up to like, I don't know, 2, 3 years sometimes in the contract. But that also works against you because if you want to get out of the contract, then it's also very complex to get out sometimes. So keep that in mind as well. And again, sometimes the insurance won't even let you know that your contract expired. And we've had plenty of situations where therapists were billing, 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 and all of a sudden they stopped getting paid only to find out that their contract expired and then the insurance never even told them. And now those therapists can't even get back in network with the insurance because the insurance now says they're not accepting any more new providers. So, so yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, but yes, pre-RCM is important because it does also have a component of credentialing and contracting.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we could talk probably for a whole day on just this one topic with it. Other things with insurance credentialing, just to highlight, some therapists don't realize that some insurances, have a limit on units, that, they might only pay 4 units. The recredentialing thing, yeah, you hit most on it. For Q&A questions, we're going to answer all of your questions at the end. If you could put just because we have a lot of material to cover and we might answer some of them as we go, if you can put them in the Q&A section, that way when we get through the end, we'll just go through and hit all of those questions at once as well. Okay, so let's go to patient registration and insurance verification. So in this process, this is where you collect the patient information, verify insurance, hopefully before the visit. You confirm the provider's network status to avoid out-of-network claim denials. We see a lot of people skipping the insurance verification part, not 100% sure why that is, but it's really important in order to have a good system in place to collect the appropriate information from the beginning and throughout. People change insurances and they may forget to tell you, so you need to have a good process in place so that you are always getting the most updated information when we go through this. So questions from you guys. What are some common challenges that you guys have in this process of collecting patient information and verifying insurance, out of curiosity? If you guys want to share in the comment section.
No questions, but
Yeah, we can go
I can
ahead and
step
start
into
talking about challenges and practices.
yeah, again, this is another topic I can talk about a lot based on the client interactions that I have. So it is important to do a proper intake for the patients. So even if you're operating your own clinic, right, so make sure that you're collecting all the right information from the patient. And this is also one of the big feedbacks we got from the Hello Note side, which is why we recently introduced our new dynamic forms, where you can structure the forms and collect the information from the patient, and then it pushes it to the patient chart. So we're excited to be rolling that out because it is important. And then within Hello Note also, we added the check eligibility feature. so you can actually run eligibility right from that. Because honestly, if you're doing cash, if you're doing cash, you don't have to deal with running eligibility. But if you're insurance, then you absolutely must check eligibility, right? And I don't think there should be any exceptions to that because no one plan is the same. Even if you have, United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield, there's so many plans out there. You can't assume that one plan follows the same rules as another plan. Okay, and that also gets some some practice owners and therapists into trouble because that's the assumption. And then when you bill, and remember, by the time you bill, by the time you get a denial, even you already might have seen the patient for 3, 4, 5 or more visits by that point, right? And only to find out that the insurance changed or they had authorization limits. So that's very costly, right? So it is very important to check eligibility, to do the proper intake. Whatever consent intake forms you need to do that as well. But it is important to do that.
Yeah, as far as the therapists we work with, we see, a lot of therapists sometimes skip the process of checking insurance verification and just hope for the best, or they're not verifying insurance on a regular basis, or they don't have systems in place, especially for those of us that work in the home with outpatient in the home, not being cognizant about looking for maybe home health stepping in and so forth. And you're not going to get paid if home health is in there. Also just the process, with the therapists we work with, we really work to get that intake form, as automated as possible using sending it out electronic so it can be completed and you have all the information you need. The other thing is I see people commenting in here, just the time factor. A big game changer for the therapist that we work with is just adding in, admin staff, or we use a lot of virtual admin staff, and teaching them how to manage this and making sure they're able to take care of it and follow through with everything on a regular basis has been a game changer for a lot of practice owners. Because when you're first getting up and going, it's hard to do everything all by yourself. So knowing when to get another person in to be able to check that insurance information, re-verify the insurance, making sure that you're collecting all the data you need to have, as well, is really important. And the great thing with Hello Note is everything is, integrated with Inovalon or whatever clearinghouse you choose to use. It can make things a lot easier with that. So, okay, so first step, you need to have a good process in place for getting all of the information for patient registration, but it doesn't stop there. You need to have a process in place so you're getting the updated information throughout the time you're working with the client, and you need to have a good system in place for insurance verification, not only before you see them, but also throughout the cycle as people can switch insurances and so forth with that. Anything else you want to add for that step, Steve?
Oh, that's good. Just have a good system in place, and yeah, I think that's one of the most important things is to have a good system in place to capture all those details and run eligibility. So as you said, we are integrated. So HelloNote is integrated with different clearinghouses. There might be some that work better for your practice than others. So if you have any questions on that, reach out to HelloNote. We'll help you pick the best fit based on our experience.
Okay, next one is charge capture. So convert services provided into actual billable charges, ensuring proper documentation of treatments and procedures for accurate billing. Common challenges that we see are missed or incomplete charge entries, incorrect documentation leading to either overbilling or underbilling. It's really important to have a good system in place to make sure that you guys are accurately capturing what your therapists are doing, and don't rely on the therapist to know it. It goes back to good training of your staff, to make sure they know what they need to do when they're out seeing a client and billing and documentation. But with Hello Note, you guys simplify the process because you can only, you limit the charges that they can include and so forth. We see sometimes that therapists don't limit their CPT codes, and then they'll have staff that kind of see this code and they're like, oh, that sounds good. Cool, I'll bill that. Well,
Yeah,
then it gets denied. So, Steve, thoughts on this
yeah.
this part?
Yeah, I could talk a lot about this as well. So one of the first things, so yeah, this goes back to incomplete or inaccurate documentation. So make sure, I mean, if you're the practice owner, then your documentation should be on point because how valuable that is to your business, right? So if you are hiring therapists, again, they could be amazing therapists, great therapists, but not all the time are they great documentation specialists, right? And sometimes it feels like that, on top of being a therapist and helping patients, you have to be an expert in documentation and billing. So again, that's not why we went to school. So it is important when you onboard a therapist just to give them the opportunity to do a note and kind of supervise it for them. Not, I don't mean to say co-sign it. I just mean to say have them do a note and then review it once they're done. In Hello Note, we actually, in the user settings, you can check a box that says disable finalize. And we have a lot of clients that use that when they onboard a new therapist or a student. And before they can finalize a note, it will require somebody's approval. So you can check that box and then they can save as draft and then you review it. Because again, there's key details in that documentation that might be missing depending on the insurance. So I do recommend you do that at least for the first session or note, I would say, for a therapist that you're bringing on. Because again, you want to make sure that the therapist is not just copying, pasting from somewhere or using some random AI tools just to do the documentation. And then once you read it, it doesn't make sense. It can fly up until if you get an audit, then you'll have an issue. That also leads back to billing, right? Same thing for billing. When you bill certain CPT codes, you want to make sure that the therapist is billing appropriately. So in Hello Note, in the case settings, if you use Hello Note, we have 8-minute rule or AMA rule, or you can just kind of have a minutes and units up to the therapist's discretion. So make sure that you're properly flagging that, because if a therapist is not well versed with specific billing rules, this feature that we have will lock them into making sure that they're adhering to the 8-minute rule, for example, right? You shouldn't, I mean, I don't think any therapist should always be referencing a chart just to make sure that everything fits. The system will do that for you, and if there's a discrepancy, it will let you know. So make sure you're doing that. Um, and going back to just insurance for a little bit, sometimes, and Kara, you mentioned this, sometimes the insurances don't pay for CPT codes, certain CPT codes, right? So just because a therapist wants to bill a certain CPT code, it actually might be an issue because the insurance won't pay for it. So it is important to set up your case types in Hello Note, and you can set up CPT codes for that specific case type. So this way they can only bill what's appropriate for that insurance. Okay. Same thing for different just insurances, doesn't even have to be case types, but yeah, some insurances will restrict different CPT codes versus other insurances that are more open to other CPT codes, which again doesn't make sense from a therapist perspective because you know what you're billing, but sometimes if the insurance does not pay for it, you obviously can't bill for it because you're not going to get reimbursed for it, right?
Yeah, big one.
So yeah, that is
A
important.
big one is, like, for example, and there's a few different states that do this, but for example, North Dakota Medicaid, they don't pay for self-care. Well, a
Mhm.
therapist doesn't necessarily, I mean, and no matter how many times we tell our therapists, North Dakota Medicaid doesn't pay for self-care, when you're out seeing clients, as a therapist, sometimes you forget.
Mhm.
So when you can set up the case settings so that they can't bill that when they're seeing clients on North Dakota Medicaid, it's going to save you a ton in the long run, versus getting the denials back because they built that code even though they shouldn't have.
Absolutely. Yeah. So So it is important for charge capture because it leads from the therapist side.
Another important thing I want to mention is chart audits. How many of you guys have a system in place to do chart audits? I mean, obviously, if you're one person show, that's different, but as soon as you bring on staff, you should have a system in place for conducting regular chart audits to identify, any missing or incorrect charges. Steve and I both work closely with Melanie. She's a compliance expert, and she comes in and does chart audits with a lot of the therapy companies we work with. I have her come in and do chart audits with all of the staff that we work with, and it's great because you have another person that comes in and lets what you should be looking at or any concerns and so forth, so that you do have a good process in place. So out of curiosity, if you can put in the chat yes or no, how many people do regular chart audits? And it's fine if you don't, because I was there in that stage when I didn't know that we should be doing this. So yes or no, if you guys have a process in place for doing chart audits.
We got a lot of no's, some yeses. So
Yes. So
yeah.
yeah. So a good thing, and if you are solo, we do have a template that we share with our therapist that you can go through yourself. So if that's something that you'd like as a resource, just reach out to us as well, because you still should be looking at your notes and making sure that you do have everything in place as well. Anything else on charge capture, Steve, before I move to the next one?
No, I think the next slide also is similar, so we can hop in. So medical coding, I feel like also goes back into documentation because it is important to know, what are you billing? So that's also ICD-10 codes and kind of the modifiers, right? So with this topic, to bounce back from the last topic, so it also goes hand in hand with ICD-10 codes, right? And a lot of times you'll get a referral, for example, that has an ICD-10 code on it. And again, I'm speaking from experience from clients, is that they just use that same ICD-10 code as a treatment code, and then they get denied. So remember, you have to make sure you keep up with your ICD-10 codes and make sure you know the difference between medical diagnosis versus treatment, because the insurance pays you for the treatment, not the medical, which again, you can bill both, but make sure your primary diagnosis is reimbursable code. So in Hello Note, if you're familiar, you'll see it in red, it's going to be non-billable. So that'll give you a flag to let you know. But otherwise, yeah, you're the therapist. It's up to the therapist to make sure that you're billing properly, and that does include ICD-10 codes as well. And then regarding modifiers, so a big one is 59 modifier. So Hello Note does put that directly on the notes for you, depending what you bill. So those should be taken care of. And as a second layer of kind of scrubbing, the clearinghouse also has their own check, which is why we love working with clearinghouses, is because not only is Hello Note giving kind of its own expertise on the modifiers, the clearinghouse also can flag you if there's something that Hello Note didn't catch, right? And it can happen because again, the clearinghouse works very, very closely with insurances, and insurances, I mean payer IDs, because every payer ID can be different. So the clearinghouse might know something about a payer ID that is restricted. And then once we know that, we can update our system. But again, it's good to have kind of a double check because you don't want to get denied. So that's important as well. But otherwise, modifiers are built into the system. You don't really have to worry about it too much. And if you're doing billing, so if you're a biller, you know that in the billing section, you can click a button to update modifiers as well. Okay, so modifiers can be added either to the case, either to the CPT codes, or like specific treatment rows, which is like a data service. So that's important to know.
Yeah, some things that I see a lot is really therapists and business owners not understanding the difference between medical and treatment diagnosis, like Steve mentioned. And that treatment diagnoses are what we need to be making sure that we have the proper treatment diagnoses in there. I'd say beware of Z codes. We find that putting those in the primary diagnosis spots usually come back with denials. But again, it's once you know, your staff might not know that. So again, it's staff education is really important, and training them on what ICD-10 codes they can and cannot use. But modifiers, one thing is, especially, I don't know if any of you guys are doing telehealth, but you know, as of January 1st, with telehealth, there's different modifiers for if you're doing just audio only or the video. So making sure you have that set up. And we work with a lot of therapists who do a combination. So for example, you know, our PT might do the evaluation telehealth, and then the PTAs in there doing the treatment on site. So being able to customize your CPT code so that you have, you know, a CPT code that's for audio only telehealth with the correct modifier is really important. And that's the great thing with HelloNote. You can go in and customize all that, but it also takes you guys as business owners or billers to understand how you need to set it up from the start. And then also making sure you're training your staff appropriately. Because if those basic steps aren't in place, then that leads to so many problems down the road when you get there. Anything else on this, Steve, that you want to add?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, best practices, just to finalize, again, audits are really important, setting up your system from the start, and making sure you're training your staff. Don't assume your staff understand this stuff. Claim submissions. Okay, so preparing and submitting claims to insurances, as well as ensuring claims are complete and accurate to avoid rejections or denial or delays. So, Steve, you want to go ahead and start on this process?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to talk about here, but just to simplify it, so claim submission, you know, the therapist does a note, right? And if you're doing billing, whether you're doing your own billing or you're a biller, or you hired a biller, right? So whoever's doing the billing is not doing the documentation or picking CPT codes and units for you, right? So that comes directly from the documentation. So the claim submission essentially is a simple process when it comes to just saying, okay, here's the note. Now I'm putting that into the clearinghouse and I'm sending it off to the insurance, right? So it sounds simple enough, but there's a few things that go into that. Again, going back to modifiers, making sure the modifiers are correctly, which again, they should be on, but you knowing your business best and your payers best, you may know, hey, you know what, this is missing a specific modifier, then you can go into HelloNote, plug that in. So this way future notes have that on, so you don't have that issue. Other things is making sure that, again, we spoke about this before, but some insurances don't accept certain CPT codes, even though, again, they can be valid, right? That's the therapist decided that that's what the patient needed. It's medically necessary, but the insurance doesn't care. They're going to deny it. So it's important to know that from the claim submission. Authorizations, right? When you check eligibility, right, you have to make sure that in HelloNote, you are putting in the authorization information. So, so if you're familiar with that, if not, it's in the insurance tab. You scroll down, there's a whole section about authorizations, and you put that in there. You can put in the authorization number, how many visits were approved, the date range that it was approved. And unfortunately, the insurances are getting more complicated to work with, where now they can also limit you based on the units or minutes, or both even sometimes, right? So units was actually pretty common over the years, but minutes is actually something new that we've been hearing. So with HelloNote, we're actually incorporating minute limitations as well. So again, it's unfortunate that the insurances dictate all this stuff, because it shouldn't be up to the insurance to decide that. It should be up to the therapist, because they're the ones that are treating the patient, and it's for the patient's own good. But again, if you don't want to take the insurance, then then don't. But to run a proper business, and you have to take that insurance, if you have to take that insurance, you have to play by the insurance's rules. And that goes back to eligibility, putting everything into the system, putting in the right authorization number. And again, I also mean the right one, because many times that I've heard, when you get the when you get the authorization, sometimes the O can look like a zero, you put it in wrong, the insurance denies you, and then they're not lenient when you want to rebill it, right? Sometimes it's a headache to rebill either way, but sometimes the insurance will just tell you, you reached timely filing, and unfortunately, by the time you got denied, by the time you resubmitted, it might have passed 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. Like Medicare gives you a year. So that there should be no excuse there, especially if Medicare is, pretty straightforward where they don't have authorizations. But talking about private insurances and Medicare Advantages, they sometimes have like 2, 3 months of timely filing. So that means if you don't resubmit everything, get paid by then it's very unlikely that they'll let you resubmit and get paid. So that's important as well. Um, other things like claim submission, like a big topic now is secondaries, right? So we at HelloNode are actually incorporating secondary tools now into our system, because we're learning that some clearinghouses are not making it easy to do that. And again, this used to not be as much of an issue as it is now. So what I mean by that is, if you're billing Medicare is pretty good with an automatic crossover, meaning they forward everything to the secondary and you get paid from the secondary, all good. Sometimes if Medicare does not know that the patient has a secondary, there is no automatic crossover. But again, that you can know right away from the ERA in HelloNode or in the clearinghouse if that crossover happened. And if it did not, then you just have to bill it as a secondary. So HelloNode does have the option to generate a secondary, but we're doing better now at understanding the process to plug in all those adjustment codes from the primary, which is what takes the most time, right? So if you do have a situation like that, we'll actually help you do it. But we're working on a new kind of tool to automate that with just the click of a button, which is great. So that goes into claim submission as well. Not only primary, sometimes you have to do a secondary submission. So it is important to read your ERAs and know right away if it crossed over, because if it didn't, that's your opportunity to not waste time and say, okay, I'm going to create a secondary right away and submit it. Whereas if you run an AR report a couple months later and then you catch it. So yeah, that's a little bit about claim submission.
Some big challenges I see with working with business owners. One, Steve, we've been hitting this hard the last several months, is not getting ERAs set up appropriately and not understanding the whole ERA setup process. But also I see that therapists aren't consistent with submitting claims. So they might not submit claims on a consistent basis, and then they don't necessarily follow through to make sure that the claims did go through or there was issues on there. And then just remembering that, there are timely, some insurances you can only submit, like Steve was mentioning, in a certain period. And we find that some therapists miss out on money because they maybe submitted a claim, but it got denied and they never followed up on it. And now it's too late with that. And especially with one person shows, you get really busy and you're out there seeing clients and you don't really understand the process. And yes, you submit the claims and you're just praying that you get the money, but you don't necessarily know how to go in and follow through with it. So having a good process with that is really important. Out of curiosity, what EMR and clearinghouse are you guys using for the ones that are in here? I mean, I'm guessing we have quite a few. I mean, a lot of people that I know that are in here are Hello Note and Inovalon, but do we have any other clearinghouses that people are using?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure everyone also knows. So HelloNode is a practice management software with a billing component, but Inovalon is just one of the clearinghouses that we can work with. So every clearinghouse has their pros and cons, and that's why we encourage you to reach out to us so we can understand your business and we can put you into the right, more appropriate clearinghouse. But we do work with different clearinghouses, like Inovalon, ClaimMD, Tebra, Office Ally, Waystar, even TriZetto. We have a few clients with TriZetto. So again, as I said, there's pros and cons. We'll give you our kind of feedback on them as well. And some of them just make more sense than others, either from a functional perspective or a cost perspective. So,
Yeah,
yeah, Hello Note
we
is,
have a good variety in here, Steve. So some
yeah.
and so, I mean, yes, Steve's with Hello Note, but with our therapy business builder program, we also have therapists that use other EMR softwares and so forth as well. So we work with a wide variety of therapists. I personally use Apellis for my own business, Hello Note and Apellis, but we have ClaimMD, Inovalon, WebPT, and is it Tebra? I'm not,
I honestly don't know how to say it correctly, and I've spoken to many clients who don't know either. Some say Tebra, some say Tebra.
okay.
So I don't know.
We have Ability Office Ally, um, so kind of a wide variety. So, you know, the great thing about, and I can speak to, Hello Note, of course, but the great thing is with a one person show, and with, especially if you take like Medicare and so forth, being able to go in and do it all just clicking from Hello Note, it goes to Inovalon, and then you go in there and they make it really easy. But if you use another system, it's, hopefully it's the same thing, but make sure you're doing it consistently. Don't let it go. Another common challenge that we see, Steve, is like maybe they only submit claims once a month. Well, if you do
Yeah.
that and you find out that, you're seeing a client that maybe maybe the insurance doesn't approve that code or whatever, well, now you've gone a month of seeing these clients and billing these codes, and you didn't catch it because you never submitted your claims in order to see that they didn't do it. So how often do you recommend submitting claims, Steve?
Great question. So it really depends on your business and the need for cash flow. So by the way, do you hear me? I think my audio got cut off. Yeah,
Yep, I
okay.
can hear.
So it depends on your cash flow. I wouldn't recommend submitting billing once a month, especially with the tools we have in place. It's just clicking a few buttons to get the claims out, right? And we did recently add some automation features where you don't even have to do that. The claims can flow over directly to the clearinghouse after you do your notes, right? So if you do your notes, we actually have a feature where it go directly into the clearinghouse and release the claim. Okay, and again, that goes for multiple clearinghouses, right? So whether, whichever clearinghouses you're with, we can turn on those features. So there's no excuse not to submit it at least once a week, in my opinion. But everybody's different. So if you want to submit it once every 2 weeks or so, that's also okay. But I think once a month is a little bit too long to wait because by the time, again, going back to a few slides, by the time you submit your billing, and if something's wrong with eligibility, you might be already thousands of dollars of reimbursement in when you realize there's an issue. And depending on what the issue is, it might not be fixable, and now you're out that money. Even if it's one session, is too much. Honestly, if you're spending your time, right, you want to get reimbursed. So I highly recommend you submit your billing at least once a week. Again, I wouldn't overdo it. I wouldn't say go every day because that cuts into your time, that you have to go in and do all that stuff. And if you want to do it once a day, then just reach out to us. We'll turn on the automation for billing and that's it. You just do your notes, and it'll come in as long as there's no errors, of course. Then the RCM cycle will at least be cycling without your need to go into the billing tab to do billing.
Yeah, this is huge. I mean, so important. If you're not doing it on a regular basis and not catching it on a regular basis, it can lead to a lot of lost revenue. And especially with our therapists that are just getting up and going, you know, they're doing everything right, and they're trying to get as many clients, and they're submitting billing, and they may let this part slide, and it can lead to a lot of problems down the road. With the claim submission, yes, I personally recommend at least once a week. We do have some therapists that they like do it every day, and they're a one person show, and I'm like, save your time, because every time you go in, it does take time to do it. So, at least set one day or 2 days a week where you do this and create an automated process. Again, for those of you with bigger clinics and so forth, this is where we work to transition some of these tasks on to virtual admin, because, you know, again, you have to get to the point where you know when to delegate, and what tasks you can delegate, but you still want to have that oversight on the process as well. So again, claim submission, very important. Make sure you do it consistently, you follow through, and yeah, move on, since I see we're getting close to one. Payment posting and reconciliation. I don't know what's the deal with this, but again, this is another thing that many therapists tend to just ignore, and not necessarily do. So payment posting and reconciliation, you need to record your payments received from the insurance companies and patients, and make sure that you're collecting all the money that you should be collecting. And we might get to this coming down, but yeah, it's coming up. And then making sure you're submitting invoices to patients and so forth for what you need to. Another big one we hear from therapists is, oh, they don't have time to send out invoices for copays, or they're not collecting copays at the time of service, things like that. So, Steve, thoughts on this section?
Yep, another one of my favorite topics, right? So payment posting. So a few things here. If you are not getting your EOB electronically, right, you're going to get it in the mail. So definitely post it, right? You should always post it into the system you have. So in Hello Note, if you're using it, there's multiple ways to post the payment, whether it's manually, if you got the EOB, or we have the importing feature where you can import the ERA, and then you can click a button and it posts for you. We recently launched another automation feature where we can pull the ERAs from the clearinghouse, and it'll sync into Hello Note, and then you can post it there as well. So again, a lot of cool stuff, a lot of and we're learning from the community, right? So we're learning what we can do to speed up that process, but we also don't want to take away accuracy, right? So when you're posting payments, you have to make sure that you're posting it properly. So one tool we're incorporating, we actually incorporated this already, we released it to a few clients, is average reimbursement upon posting. So if you think about it, right, if you're posting 100 claims and you click batch post, what are the chances you're going to go in and review all of that if you click batch post? Typically very rare, right? That you're going to catch something that either got paid $0 or got paid $1 or whatever it is. So we incorporated a new feature that has average reimbursement. So as you're posting your payments, it actually will tell you the percent difference of your average reimbursement for that insurance. So if your average reimbursement is, let's say, $105.20, and all of a sudden you're posting a payment that says $80, you can catch that right in the system. It'll tell you what your average reimbursement is, and it's going to actually flag it in like a red color. Or if you got more, it'll tell you like plus, 5% that you got paid more, whatever it is. So, but again, it's an opportunity for you to know that you're posting payments, not just posting payments just to post them, but you're actually getting the right amount reimbursed that you're expecting to be reimbursed by the insurance. So again, same as billing, right? It could be very simple, like you click buttons, but there is something that goes along with it to make sure that you're actually posting payments correctly and also on a sequence as well. And what I mean by that is when you're posting payments, make sure that you post primary before secondary, because sometimes that can also lead into issues if you're posting secondary and then primary because the write-off amounts are different at that point. So that's one other thing that I noticed. Um, Other things about posting you mentioned, Kara, is collection of cash payments, right? Like co-pays or co-insurances or deductibles from the patients. So again, with Hello Note, we actually have a tool where you can charge your patients a credit card or you can post manual payments. And we are actually excited to launch. I actually saw this today for the first time, our new feature that says emailable statements. So instead of you having to print a statement and give it to the patient, we actually have a feature that we're launching for emailable statements. So there's no excuse. You can click a button, email the statement to the patient or text it to the patient. They'll verify their identity, and then that statement will come up for them, and then they can pay right there and then. And again, that goes back to our initiative to do automation, because we have a lot of other cool stuff planned for automation where we'll cycle from sending them a text, then a reminder, then an email, up until the point where you actually get paid. And if you don't get paid, then, as a last resort, it'll be up to you to make sure you call the patient or mail them a statement, whatever you need to do.
Awesome. And just want to highlight in this part, please also schedule a time at least weekly for posting your payments, running reports so you can see what you've collected, what you haven't, and keeping track from each insurance so you know what average reimbursement you should be receiving so that you're following up if you are not getting that reimbursement. Hey,
Yep.
denial management and appeals. It's crazy to me how many people just don't fight an appeal or don't file an appeal or don't follow through with the process. So just because you get something denied and you have to do an appeal, I mean, don't give up. Keep going through with the process. Steve, thoughts on this?
Yeah, we spoke about this earlier as well, like resubmission. Do your best to make sure that you don't need to do a resubmission. But again, sometimes it's just the nature of the industry. Sometimes you'll need to resubmit your claims. And if you get denied, make sure that you do appeal. Yes, appeals do take a little bit time and effort, but it's your money. So we recommend you do it. But again, once you do an appeal a few times, you'll get better at it and you'll already know the process for that insurance and it'll just be more streamlined. So yeah,
I've heard that,
that's it.
a lot of insurance companies, again, if they deny it and you appeal it and then, some people just don't follow through with the process, and they know that's gonna happen. So again, just make sure you have a process for going through and, trying to appeal all of those, denials. Hopefully you don't have any denials, but if you do. Okay, patient billing and collections. You have to be sending out invoices or setting up a system and process for collecting co-pays, co-insurances at the time of service. How many of you guys collect your co-pays or co-pays or co-insurances at the time of service? Steve,
Hopefully everybody.
while they're talking about that, anything else you want to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it's going to be good to read what people say about how they collect because it absolutely should be collected at the time of service. Because countless of times we, even us operating a clinic, we learned the hard way where if you don't do that upfront and then you give a bill to your patient a month later and it accumulated to, whatever it is, it accumulated, right? The patient can be upset and then they could say, oh, I'm not paying this, you didn't tell me. So you don't want to risk a patient being upset right? Because I mean, you're treating the patient, so you want to have a good relationship with the patient. So it's best to be upfront with them, right? And it's best to, if a patient has a credit card and whether you use the Hello Note integration credit card system or you're using, an outside credit card system, whatever it is, I recommend putting into your consent forms, right, that you will collect the card and you can charge it, after the visit if they forgot to pay or whatever it is. So it is important for the patient to be kind of understanding of that, if they have a co-payment, co-insurance, then you should be collecting it at the time of visit.
A few other things, a lot of patients, they have no idea or understanding about insurance. So we make sure from the start that, they understand what the expectations from, or what they're pay, all tongue tied. We try to make sure they understand what their bill is going to be and what, their payment is going to be. Obviously, we can't guarantee that because all insurances are crazy, but just having a system in place so you have the proper, financial agreements and making sure that patients understand it is really important, as well as having a process in place that you are doing it timely, like we talked about, and then you are following up. So don't let patient balances get high. You need to have a system in place so if they're not paying, you're following up with them, and trying to collect that payment on a regular basis. And that comes back to when you're a one-person show, you might not be able to do all of that. So when you add in like a virtual admin or, another staff, they can be consistent on following through with all of that. And financial reporting and, compliance. How many people track KPIs? Yes or no? Do you know and understand your KPIs? Yes or no? I guess kind of. I have found that, when I first started, I had no idea what a KPI even was, way back, but I see a lot of, therapists not understanding KPIs, and not monitoring them and having any KPIs in place.
That's one thing we also are trying to do better on the Hello Note side. So we have a lot of reports in the system, but sometimes KPIs are derived from reports. So if you notice on our dashboard, we did add a KPI tracker. So it does give you really cool statistics on how many like treatment visits versus evaluations you're doing per discipline, your referrals, your cancellation and no shows, including any like patient responsibility balances or insurance balances. And we actually added a new kind of filter where you can toggle that if you want to do like today only or week to date, month to date, year to date, things like that. So again, we're a big believer, and I know you are too, Kara, because you promote this all the time. Know your numbers, right? You have to track your KPIs, because it's essentially it's the health of your business, right? If you don't know your KPIs, then you have no idea. Like it's like going to a doctor's appointment, right? When you go to a doctor's appointment, the doctor, runs your blood work or whatever it is. So KPIs are like the blood work of your business because it tells you a lot of statistics that you should be knowing. And again, there's nothing wrong to run KPIs and realize that they're not good because that gives you the opportunity to fix it. You'll be able to know and track why they're not good and what you can do to do better.
And, it's funny that Katrina, I think that you put that in the do not track KPIs, but I'm solo. So, we hear this with our, so we try to require, with any therapist we work with that they get their KPI set up from the start, whether they're a one-person show, but we hear that all the time. Why do I need to run the KPIs? It's just me and so forth. Again, you have to know your numbers, and it doesn't matter if you're one person or you have, 50 staff. It is like the lifeblood of your business, and we find a lot of people don't know and understand, their numbers, and that impacts your day-to-day functioning and what your revenue is. So make sure that, same thing with like your P&Ls and your financial reports. It's really important to know and understand your all of your monthly numbers that you're bringing in, and that goes to, you know, your visit numbers, your cancellation rates, your denial rates, all of those things you want to make sure you know so that you can make a plan to deal with them. I was just meeting with a therapist that has like a cancellation rate of like 23%. It's extremely high, right? So what are you going to do about getting that number down? How do you know to get that number down? But if you don't, if you're not running reports or KPIs, you're not really knowing what's going on, and that you might have a problem like 23% of no-shows or cancellations. Compliance and
I just want to go back to the prior slide, just based on what somebody said about being solo and not needing to run KPIs. So just to quickly let you know why it's important. And I'm in New York, so New York, we have a lot of therapy offices here. So I actually have somebody I know that is a one-person show, and they do track their KPIs. And a couple years ago, they were able to sell their business for a little over $200,000, because they're fully booked. They had a successful practice. They tracked their KPIs. They sold it for a little over $200,000, and now they're employed by whoever took over their business, because he had a lot of good credentialing that he had. He had a lot of referrals. He had a lot of connections in the community. So just think about that. If he did not have KPIs, then whoever bought his business might have not been as interested, because there's no tracking. They wouldn't know how he grew. So definitely a success story. But again, he was a one-person show, and now, he gets a decent salary working for his own practice that he built just now as an employee, and he got to pocket a good amount of cash for that.
yeah, we've had one person practices come to us and they don't know why they're not making any money or they're getting burnt out. And, we ask them we ask them about their numbers and KPIs. They have no idea. And then when we put it all on paper, then it's like, well, you're not even doing as many visits as you need to even make, half of what you're looking at. So if you don't know your numbers, you're not able to make those decisions. But yeah, it impacts you down the line in multiple different ways. So compliance and regulatory adherence. I'd say this might be one of the top things that I see a lot of practices don't have a good solid foundation in establishing policies and procedures and understanding the healthcare regulations that we need to follow. And when you don't do that, that can lead to a lot of trouble down the road. So it's really important to maintain accurate documentation and coding, and to have policies and procedures in place to avoid legal and financial penalties that can arise. We've seen some posts recently about different therapy practices that are being some hefty fines because of fraudulent billing or variety of different things depending on the situation. So want to make sure that you guys do have a good foundation in place, your training staff on HIPAA, fraud prevention, payer regulations. You have a compliance plan in place. OIG has a recommendation of the 7 items you need to have in your compliance plan. And then having a system in place to stay updated with all the changing regulations and implement necessary policy updates is really important as well. And yeah, I mean, just from January 1st till now, it's been kind of crazy out there trying to keep up with everything. So you really need to have a solid foundation in place, and have your policies and procedures, have your compliance plan, a standard operating procedure in place, and then have a way to stay up to date with all of the things that are going on. Because as a healthcare practice, we have to make sure that we're implementing everything we need to and following all the rules. Steve, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this should be kind of the foundation of running a practice. You should know all the compliance and, you know, all the guidelines of the insurances and state and everything to make sure that you're following through with that. So yeah, it is important. It's, you know, I think as you said, Kara, it's one of the most important things, and I think everyone starting a business should start with this, right? So and it does lead back into just in general, your business plus the RCM cycle, because compliance is crucial.
Yeah, 100%. And oops, just a second. Did I skip one? Okay, so those were the primary stages of RCM. Actually, if I would redo it, I'd probably move compliance and regulatory adherence to the first and the end because it's your foundation, but you also got to consistently be following through with that. So strategies to optimize revenue cycle management, develop a solid foundation. I think social media glamorizes private practice. We have people in here that have had a private practice for a long time, some that are just getting up and going. But as a healthcare practice, it is essential that you do develop that solid foundation and have all the key components in place and that you understand the rules and regulations we need to follow. For RCM, just going back through this presentation and learning all of the different steps and making sure you have a process in place and systems in place to make sure that you know you're completing everything you need, and then automate and use systems to make it work. You know, that's one of the key things that we work with a lot of therapy practices on is how can we automate tasks and develop systems so you can be more efficient and you can reduce errors and optimize your reimbursement. Establishing KPIs is essential, and knowing and understanding your financials is absolutely essential. Any other strategies that you want to mention, Steve?
I think those are good. I think we covered a lot of ground here for a lot of strategies. And again, we encourage everyone to reach out if you have questions. You know, I think Kara's a huge valuable asset to answer a lot of these questions and make sure that your business is on the right track. Because essentially, look, and Kara, you know this, we've had a lot of TBB members, the Therapy Business Builder members start, but again, not everyone can make it because you have to put time into your RCM cycle, right? Because if you don't, and you don't get paid and you kind of take shortcuts, you know, once your business is running, you could take shortcuts because you know how to manage them. But in the beginning is not the time to take shortcuts because your business is an entity and you need to grow it and nurture it for it to be successful, and then you can decide how you want to, you know, how you want to play it out after. So it is important to understand the revenue cycle, revenue management cycle, revenue cycle management, however you want to say it, because it severely impacts if your business will survive.
100%. Well, I know we already went 15 minutes over. We have a whole section on all of these common terms. And we also have some Q&A questions. So, couple options. Here we could, for our next private practice hour in April, we could do like a 2.0 where we go through these terms and address any follow-up questions, or we can kind of run through some of these now. Thoughts, Steve, or people that are here? Because I can send out the PowerPoint along with the video for those of you guys that registered as well.
What I would do is I would send out the PowerPoint with the terms, and I would maybe collect some Q&A questions during the registration. So this way, if somebody has questions on some of this stuff, we can go over it on the next meeting and tailor it directly to questions. Because I know we covered a lot of stuff here already. So I think it would be good to give everyone an opportunity to go through it once more. And I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of questions. So we can collect the questions and then go over those questions on a live webinar as well, for everybody. Because again, I love questions because I think the questions you ask, others may not either be thinking about asking them, or they just didn't have the opportunity, or they just didn't ask. So I definitely love questions.
Awesome. So what we'll do is for our next, and it's on the calendar. So we're gonna do these, I believe we have the third Friday of the month at noon. So our next topic, we'll do RCM maybe 2.0. We'll finish going through all of the terms, and then we'll go through all the questions and answers that people submitted. And then if you guys have additional questions that you want to address, I see some big things that people are asking is, verifying insurance, how to choose a clearinghouse. We have a whole presentation on KPIs. What report should we use to track our monthly cancellations? So, realistically, over the next few months, we could kind of map out some items to include in that. I'd also encourage you guys that are, if you're just getting up and going, or you're not where you need to be, think about getting a coach. You don't have to use Steve and I's program to help you, but find someone that's experienced in this, because it's going to pay off in the long run. And help you creating systems and automations, and knowing and understanding all of this is going to more than pay for itself. And there's, a variety of resources out there. Because trying to learn and understand this all is difficult. I mean, I've been doing it forever, and I don't know what I would do without my coaching community and team for support with that. So yes, Steve, do you want to answer any of these questions now, or should we follow up with all of them? Because I'm guessing since it's almost 1:30, you probably have another meeting.
Yeah, so we went over, and it's good to go over, it means we're engaging a lot of people. So Kara, let's make sure we jot all these questions down and we get back to everybody. So this way everybody can benefit from all of the questions, right? And let's make sure we reach out to everybody. And Kara, you have everyone's email address, correct?
Yep.
we
So
can
I'll
send a
send out
follow-up.
I'll send out the recording, and I'll send out the PowerPoint, and then I am also getting all of your questions. So we'll make sure we cover them next time. If there's any that you need immediate help with, again, reach out to either Steve or myself. If you are ready to get started with a private practice, or you already have one and you want to make it more profitable and get time back for you, reach out to us. That's what we love to do, is help therapists start, build, grow, and scale their practices. So we're more than happy to meet with you as well to see if there's something we can do to help you with that. So we'll send all this out, and then we'll see you guys hopefully next month. Also, if anyone's on here, we do have a live event coming up Sunday, April 6th in Philly. So if you can attend that, highly recommend it. We have lots of great speakers coming to that as well. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kara. Take care.